At first, my favorite was Verge. Then I found Patchwork. She may be a bit broken, but she's the best. She's just the best. And I'll go over why. Now I'm a bit upset. I was looking for information on the skill that Shelter gets, because he's the only character right now I don't have fully trained. I reached the end of the game, he's fully leveled, but he's in training for his last skill, Wraith. So I went to a guide to try to see what Wraith did, then I realized it's in game, so we're fine. In the guide, it upset me a bit. In their guide, they said she's a B tier character. No, she's the strongest character in the game. Now, she could be bugged, but here's why. Here's why she's the strongest character. Especially once you go against Sacred Coil, they have mechs, they have robots, droids, whatever. And she does a guaranteed, it's only 4 damage at first. You're like, yeah, 4 damage, not a big deal. But it's guaranteed damage. On robots, it's either 50% more damage or double damage on robots. I think it's double off the top of my head, which is really good. She's the only one that does bonus damage to robots. So if you start the game on Impossible and you go towards the Sacred Coil, have her on your team. That's her best faction to deal with. Her first thing is Combat Scanner. The shame is you can only use it once per mission. But if it's a 1 mission thing, then it's great. The other great thing is it's not a breach slot item. So she could be in the 3rd or 4th slot and you can still use this skill. So this is the path I absolutely recommend. I mean, this could be good as well for CC, but I don't like the potentially word. Voltaic Arc. Basically, the enemy moves close, or you move close to an enemy, she basically zaps them. It's only 1 to 3 damage, I think. Actually, it's only 1 to 2 in the beginning. It gets upgraded. So it's 1 to 2, so you're like, okay, it's not a big deal, you know, it's a bit of damage, but it can go 2 tiles away. 2 tiles away is still pretty good, and she can hit multiple enemies, because it also arcs over to other enemies. It might not at first in the beginning, that's why I was getting upset the first time I restarted, because I wasn't sure. This used to deal more damage, because there's always locks on all of these, you can't tell. Threat recognition would be great. It can be used more often. So she could use this if you have a lot of big shooters in your team, because it'll also add 25 crit at the breach point, and you can use it more than once per fight. A lot of missions are only single missions, single outings, so I was like, well, let's try this instead. I like the idea of zapping people that get close to me. In early game, 1 extra damage goes a long way when you go to Subdue, which is where she gets pretty strong, because if you subdue an enemy and this kills it before she hits them, she doesn't use her movement. So if an enemy has 1 HP, maybe 2 later on, but if an enemy has 1 HP, you go to Subdue, the game bugs out, and then she can move on to a different enemy because she didn't actually club the enemy. And you can chain that as long as she can kill them before actually not clubbing them. But because it jumps around, it's pretty strong. Like, I finished a map last night on Impossible. She killed like 6 enemies in that 1 turn. It's insane. And because on Impossible there are more enemies, which means it chains more, which means more AoE damage. Stasis Field has to be one of my favorite skills from her. I don't use this on my allies. It says to use it on an ally. Screw that. I've noticed that since XCOM 2, where you can use this on an enemy. Why take out one of your allies? You're basically weakening yourself 25% if you do it on an ally. Do it on the enemy. They can't move. You can't kill it, sure. So use on a sorcerer, dominator, sectopod. You can use on the cyber disc, I'm pretty sure. Just take them out of the equation. Even the bosses, the Alpha Strike boss, the Shrike leader, whatever his name was, Ronins, they move super fast. Just remove them for an entire turn. Then you have a turn cooldown that you can't use it. Then you can use it again. So just figure out, maybe you stupor the Ronin on the next turn, and then you can just do Stasis Field again if you're not done killing everything else. Really good skill to just ignore an enemy. It doesn't end your turn, so use it first, then do your next move, which could be hitting them with your jolt. Here it says shock therapy can change your chaining jolt to disorient and potentially stun a target. Could be great. I mean, it might be great. Depends on the chance to hit on stun. Because I didn't like the chance to hit on stun, I went with high voltage. There's an extra 1 to 3 damage. She can do 2 to 5 damage if she goes close to an enemy or an enemy comes close to her. It's like I said earlier, the poison blast, I'm pretty sure triggers this. If you tongue pull her to an enemy, it kills the enemy. So one strategy that I was doing at some point when I used Fork would have an enemy at her. On her second turn, you unbind the enemy that you have, you tongue pull Patchwork, she'll hit that enemy, and then you can rebind the enemy if he's not dead. Or you can just pull an enemy to Patchwork if she's nearby, because it's 2 tiles away. They seem to be pretty smart, and they put something that blocks against some walls. If there's a window, I think it works. But if there's a full-on wall, it won't jump the wall. It has to be able to get around the lightning, that is. So this is really strong because it does extra damage to mechs. You can basically just walk to enemies and just watch them die to a point. But if they're grouped up, it hits really wide areas. And this adds damage to her gremlin attack. It's not just her moving, it's also her chaining jolt. And then capacitor discharge. Capacitor discharge is really strong. It's like a grenade, but then it can disorient the enemies as well. If there's a giant area of robots, just send that. The only shame is it's once per mission. Another good thing with her is reprogram does not end your turn, even if it's 50% chance. If you're not planning on moving, she can see really far with her chaining jolt. Really far. So try to get that mech. It won't end your turn, then do chaining jolt. Or shoot, or whatever you want to be doing. But she's the queen at dealing with robots in this game. You need her during Sacred Coil. I mean, maybe you don't need her. There's other ways to deal with enemies, like Rupture, like maybe just shooting more bullets at them, more grenades. But why, when she excels at killing robots, especially high HP robots, and not missing? This is where I don't think I'd play through the game on Impossible without her. That's how good she is.